don't forget to subscribe, like the video, and also put your comments down below. For the purpose of today's tutorial, we'll be learning to create the index page of a particular website, and this is what it looks like. Right, this is what it looks like. So we'll be learning to create this using HTML and CSS, and the major CSS concept we'll be applying in creating this video is a CSS flexbox. So I want you to stay tuned, follow closely, and get to understand. Don't just watch the video, make sure you understand and you have something to go home with from this particular video. Thank you, stay tuned. Alright, this video is for educational this already. This video is for educational purposes only. So let's begin. When you look at this particular picture, you can see that it looks like the body is everything we see here, right? So it looks like there is a container here and there's a container at the right hand side. So the container at the left contains a logo, a navigation bar, and some empty space here. We also have a container at the right hand side, right, which contains another container with the text "Welcome to Decorated Green," right, on it. So we'll be doing this. So we have a main container which is the entire body, and that main container contains two sub containers, which is this one and then the one on the right side. The one on the right side also contains another container which also contains the text "Welcome to Decorated Green." So I already have some HTML code, and then we'll be styling it using CSS. So as you can see on my screen, I have an HTML code here. It has our main container, it has the first sub container, the one on the left hand side, and also has a second sub container. So I'll be styling this from scratch, all right, using CSS, flexbox box properties, and also a lot other CSS concepts, right? So for the purpose of that, let me go live. For us to see what the code is looking like, so that when we start with the styling, you see. So this is what it's looking like. This is the first boss. This is boss one up to this point, and then this is boss two up to this point. So we'll learn how to use the flex to make them side by side, and then we can also see what to do next from there. Now here in my CSS, the first thing I want to do is to take all paddings and all margins off, right? Because most of the HTML elements by default they have a padding or a margin, and I don't want to be fighting with the default paddings and margin. I want to be able to structure my own page with my own measurement, not from what is already there. I don't know if you get it. So I'll be taking off all margins and all paddings, right? With that, I have to use the universal selector. So I'll select everything and say padding 0, and I'll also give it a margin of 0, right? No margin right, margin 0, right? And then the next thing I want to do is to use a font family, right? So the font family, my favorite is sans serif. That's what I'll be using, right? For the purpose of this tutorial. No, it's not font weight, right? Font family. I'll be using sans serif as my font family. So from this point, I would display my main container. Right, I will apply flex display, so everything is now side by side on the screen. Then I'll give it a width because I want the main container to stretch across the page. So I'll give it a width of 100%, and I also give it a height because I want it to be as tall as the viewport height. So I'll give it a height of 100 viewport height. Okay, now let's see the first sub container, the one that contains our navigation bar. So I say sub1, right? That is the class in the HTML. The class is sub1. So for my sub1, I also give it the same height as the main container. So the height is going to be 100%, and then I'll give it some width, right? Because the two containers are sharing the same width, so I'll give a part of it to this. So let me say I'll give 15% of the width to the first container, and then the rest 85% to the other one. So let's see. I'll give it some padding as well, so that there will be some spacing between the text and then the walls of the container. Next thing I want to do is I have a logo box in there. I have a container for my logo. So I'll target that and I'll say background image. Right. I'll say URL and I'll type the the logo's name. It has not appeared on the screen yet, so we have to do some adjustments. And I'll say background position. I'll say center, right? Background size. I'll say contain, right? It should contain the image, and then background repeat, right? Background repeat. I'll say no repeat. So now we can see that it's still not appearing on the screen. So let's give it some height. Let's give it some height and see what will happen. So height like 250 pixels. Wow. So our logo has appeared on the screen now. We should give a little bit of space between the logo and then the top of the container. So for that I'll use a margin at the top. Right. I'll say margin top and I'll give it a margin at the top to be 20 pixels. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. The next thing I'll do is to target my navigation box also. So I'll say dot navigation box, and then that is a class I give to it. So I'll display flex. You may not actually see, but I'll display flex, and then I will align items. I want it to be in the middle, so I'll align items in the center, and then I will justify. I'll justify content and put it in the center as well. So now you see that everything in the navigation has moved to the middle, right? Everything has moved to the middle. Now let's give it some height as well. So we want the navigation to also be of some height. So I will say 200 pixels, right? I'll give that 200 pixels. No, that's fine. For now, that's fine. And then we want some margin. We want some margin at the bottom, and then also a border at the bottom, right? So I'll give it some margin at the bottom, let's say 50 pixels, and then I also give it a border at the bottom and say 1 pixels solid gray, right? Good. So it's looking clean. The next thing I want to do is to the next thing I want to do is to style the navigation items, right? You can see because of the unordered list we use, so the dot is still appearing there. So I'm going to select all that and then style them in a very nice way. So I'll say nav box, nav UL, and then here I'll say list style, and I'll say none, right? List style none. I will align the text in the middle of the list. I'll align the text in the middle. I will display flex as well, right? I display flex. Now I will say flex direction because I want it to be in column, right? So I'll say flex direction to be column, right? And then I'll give it a gap. I want some amount of space between the items, so I'll give it a gap of 15 pixels. Let's see. Okay, okay, that works well. That works so well. Now um, from there I'll say font size. Let me reduce the size a little. So I'll say 13 pixels, and then I'll say font weight. Now I don't want it to be bold, but then I don't want it to be light as well. So instead of giving the font weight to be bold, I'll give it some value like 350. So it will be a little bold, but not so bold. Right? but not so good. So we are done with the first box. Let's look at the other box. So I'll say sub 2, which is my sub container 2, right? And I'll give it a background image. Given that I already have the image, so I'll say my URL and I'll type the image background or JPG. No, let me not use this image. Let me use some other image. So I'll say image.png. Now this is the image I'll be using. So let me give it some background size, and I'll say this one should cover the entire space. Let me say background repeat, and I'll say no repeat, and I also give it a background position. I want to be centered, and then from there, let me give it a height as well. Let me give this container a height as well. So it's gonna have a height of 100%. I need it to be as tall as the main container, if you still remember. Then I'll give it a width. So the left container has a width of 15%. So this one will take the rest of the width, right? So it's gonna stretch across the page beautifully. Okay. Now there is another container on this one that contains the text "Welcome to Green," right? So and that is centered on the page. So I'll move that to the middle, right? So I will display flex again on this container. I'll display flex again. I will justify. First of all, let me align. So I'll align my items to center, and then I'll justify my content to end. Right, should move to the side a little bit. Okay, that's fine. Should move to the side a little bit. So I'm done with the container too. So now let me look at the text box, the container that is containing the writing there. So I'll say that's a class name text box, and I'll give it a background color. So a background color of white. Okay, I'll give it some I'll give it some height and width as well. So for the height, I'll give it 370 pixels, 370 pixels, and for the width, I'll give it 400 pixels, right? So it's looking good. Now you can see from the original picture there is a little bit of gap between the container and then the main container and the parent container. So to the right, I'll give it some margin to the right. So I'll say margin right, and then for my margin right, I'm going to use. So I'll use 100 pixels for my margin right? And then I need some space between the writing, the text, and the container itself. So I'll give it some padding, right? Starting from the top, I want the top should be 20 pixels. I want the left should be 30 pixels. No, from the top we go to the right. Right should be 50. The bottom should be 20 pixels again, and then the left should be 20 pixels. All right. So 30 pixels. So that's okay. That's okay for me. Now let's test. Let's start the writings in there. For the heading, welcome to decorated green. I'm using H3. So I'll say the H3 in text box. I'll target that and say color. So the color has to be green, right? And then for the second part, font size. I'll increase the font size a little, right? I'll increase the font size a little. So let me say 3.2 EM. Let's see how it looks. So yeah, that looks perfect for me. That looks perfect for me. So font weight, I'll give it some weight. I want it to be bold, so I'll make it bold. And then I need some space between it and the paragraph at the down, so I'll give it a margin at the bottom. So that margin should be 20 pixels at the bottom, right? Yeah. So now I can style my paragraph as well. So I'll say text box paragraph. The paragraph in there, right? So I need the margin, I need a font size for the paragraph. And so that font size, I'll give it a font size of 30 pixels. And then I'll give it a color. No, it's already black, so I shouldn't give it any color again because it was originally black. So there should be some spacing between it and then the the buttons at the bottom. So I'll give it a space at the bottom using the margin bottom, and I'll give it 23 pixels at the bottom. Okay, 23 is fine. So I cannot text, I cannot style my buttons. So I'll give them some padding first. I'll give them some padding first. So let me give them padding of 12 pixels. Let's see. Alright, 12 pixel is fine. I'll give them a margin to the right so that one can move from the other a little. 7 pixels. Okay, that's also fine. That's also fine. So now let's see color. Right, I'll give the text color to be green. Okay, so yeah, our page is looking clean, it's looking active, it's looking nice, everything is on point. But it's left with two things we have to do. All right, so the first thing we have to do right now is when you look at the original image, this button was active and it was looking green. Then this home, on the navigation to the home, was also looking green. So it was active. So let's see, I've given them IDs, right? Active button and active item. So for the home, I'll be using active item as an ID. To target my ID, I'll use this hashtag. So I'll say active item. Right. To start that, I'll say background color. It needs a background color of green. It also needs a padding. I give it a padding of 5 pixels top and bottom, and then 7 pixels left and right. I'll give it a border radius. I want the corners to be rounded a little, so I'll give it a border radius of 11 pixels. Then I'll give it a color white. Right, the writing has to be white, so that looks great. And then I'll do the same thing for the active. No, it's an ID. So I'll do the same thing for the active button as well. And then I'll give it a background color of green, and then I'll give it a color. The text color should be what? White. All right, it shouldn't have a border, so I'll say border none. So all right, everybody, that's it. We're able to neatly style our index page by using CSS and then flexbox concepts, right? CSS and also flexbox content. So thank you for staying tuned. Don't forget to like and subscribe.